college football, and more college football. Coming up next on the Michael Welch Podcast.
All my blessings, 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 all my blessings.
I need my blessings every penny, daily counting every single one, I'm seeing plenty.
So my top 10 after week one looks like this. Georgia, followed by Miami, Alabama, Texas, and Ole Miss in the top 5. Not too surprising there. It shouldn't be for anyone. Georgia, of course, made a resounding statement in the game of the week. 34-3, absolutely thrashing Clemson, who didn't have a shot against Georgia at all. Of course, it brought to the forefront the whole transfer deal and Clemson taking a step back and all these talking points. But really, Georgia was just flat out better. Carson Beck, 23 for 31 for 278 yards and a couple touchdowns as well. It was a slow start. It was 6-0 at the half before Georgia really just grinded away at Clemson in the second half. Over 150 yards rushing as well. They have another great back there in Nate Frazier, it looks like. 11 carries for 83 yards and a touchdown, over 7 yards per carry there. Top 2 running backs were out for various reasons as well for Georgia, so they were not even at full power there, taking on Clemson. Receivers, it looks like they have a mix of guys. The ball kind of went around to Humphrey, Smith, Lucky, I love it. No one had, well, Smith had a handful of 5 catches for 56 yards, but everyone else got in the mix a little bit there, but they look like they're going to have a very dangerous crew there. Jalen Walker, credited for a sack and a half and almost 2 tackles for losses there. The linebacker position looks like a dangerous young man there patrolling in the midsection of that defense as well. Cade Klubnik already not looking good, and that's problematic for Clemson. 142 yards passing, just not a lot going on. Threw a pick as well. 59 yards rushing, less than 4 yards per carry. Didn't fumble the ball, though, amazingly, which is something that I'm used to seeing him certainly do. So not a very productive day for Clemson at all. They didn't have the ball a whole lot in Georgia territory in the first half of this, and Georgia ultimately doubled up on yardage, 447 to 188. And you're just going to hear a whole lot about how Clemson needs to really change the methodology and what they're doing there, and we'll see moving forward. But after several slow starts for many teams around the country, Georgia in the toughest matchup, one of the most dominating fashions, easily the number 1 team. Let's move to Miami. Now, I have them number 2. I thought playing Florida on the road, couple difficult check boxes there. Florida now still talented, I think, but they may already be giving up on Billy Napier. You're seeing a number of posts and information coming out. Not happy players there, and Billy Napier will be out sooner rather than later. Part of that's the schedule, but man, just tough sled there. Another game doubled up in yardage, just about 529 to 261 for Miami, who looked dominant. 5 for 10 on third down for Miami, able to just move the ball over 10 yards per pass attempt. Florida, 1 for 9 on third down, under 5 yards per passing attempt, a couple turnovers there. For as many games that were full of penalties, this one only had less than a handful, about 4 penalties total. Just noting that as I'm looking at the box score in particular. Cam Ward looked fantastic. I still felt like even at Washington State, I still wasn't sure if he would translate to a really high level quarterback level playing field. And I think he did pretty good in the Swamp. I just didn't know that he had the weapons necessarily in Washington State. It's really conductive to him needing to pilot that offense. And they just, I don't know, past 2 years were fine for him. But I'm just not sure that he was a great quarterback. A good quarterback, sure. But he's potential to be something special. And the rest of the schedule looks like they have potential to go undefeated. Certainly with what we've seen in a sample size and what we saw ahead of time. Florida A&M, Ball State on deck, at South Florida, home against Virginia Tech, who lost to Vanderbilt in overtime. At California, at Louisville, home against Florida State. That's not looking so difficult. Home against Duke, at Georgia Tech, home against Wake Forest, at Syracuse. Are you kidding me? This team is looking awesome. They could run the football a little bit more effectively. Damian Martinez only averaged, over 4 yards per carry, about 65 yards on the ground, and had a long one of 17 in there. But he's certainly capable of doing more in there. Xavier Respero, 7 grabs for 112 and a touchdown. Elijah Araro, 89 yards on 4 grabs. Elijah Horton, 70 yards on 4 grabs. Looks like the receiving weapons truly are there. They have some nice guys on defense. Jaden Harris looked really good out there. The D-back, the sophomore out there, Elijah Alston. They look like they have some guys going on the defensive end and just dominated Florida in this game. I have Alabama, number 3. They dominated inferior competition. Western Kentucky, which actually houses some decent squads from time to time. 63-0 though. It was 42-0 at the half. They had no problems in this ball game at a time when a lot of teams struggled in week 1. TJ Finley for Western Kentucky is not a bad quarterback, and he had less than 100 yards and a couple of picks in this one. Overall, they held Western Kentucky to less than 200 yards of offense and 3 for 18 on third down. That is insane. The Tide rolled up 600 yards of total offense. This was just a dominating performance. Milroe only threw the ball 9 times. Sampson only threw the ball 9 times. Overall, Milroe came away with 5 total touchdowns on less than 20 touches. Just crazy dominating fashion. No problems here. And there are plenty of squads that played worse. Power ranked teams, of course, on the schedule. Texas played Colorado State, which is not supposed to be, again, a better ranked team compared to some of these. Ole Miss and Furman was not a particularly exciting matchup, but the Longhorns did hold this one to 0 points on Colorado State's end, 52-0. Pulled the starters at the end. Had Manning, chance for Manning, of course, as he stepped out there to throw the ball a few times, and he threw a touchdown as well. So a great appearance for Archer Manning there. Ewers was 20 for 27, 260 and 3 touchdowns. And they ran the ball for a bundle. So no problems there for Texas. As far as wide receiver options, Isaiah Bond had a touchdown. Looks like he'll be just fine in that system. Golden was brought in as well for, I believe he was the Houston transfer. A couple touchdowns for him. Wingo looked good. Cook looked good. I mean, plethora of options against a team they obviously should have beat by a handful. And Justin Marshall for Colorado State looks like a decent back for them this year. He did average over 4 yards per carry on 25 totes there for over 100 yards for Colorado. My number 5, is Ole Miss. No problems for them either. Furman was one of these teams that was much lower in the rankings. FCS level team, I do believe. Jackson Dart, 22 for 27, 418 yards and 5 touchdowns passing. Also 27 yards on the ground accredited and a rushing touchdown as well. So 6 total for him. Nearly 450 yards of total offense. We get the backups in there. We get the backup backs in there. Matt Jones, at running back, had 3 carries for 68 yards and a couple touchdowns. Ulysses Bentley was actually the starter, 6 carries for 23, but a whole bunch of guys got in there as they're replacing Judkins after he transferred to Ohio State. Trey Harris, 8 grabs for 179 yards and 2 touchdowns. One of the top performers on that squad. Just an excellent job for Ole Miss, doing exactly what you should do against much inferior competition. 772 yards of total offense. And the Paladins, 172 yards, 10 penalties, a turnover, 3 for 17 on third down. I mean, that's what you'd expect Ole Miss to do, that kind of damage. Notre Dame, of course, one of the other huge games. They were ranked 7th, playing number 20 Texas A&M on the road. 23-13 was the final. This really came down to the second half, in particular the final frame here. Now, Riley Leonard, passing is never where you're going to be really shocked at what he can do. He was 18 for 30 for 158. He did scramble for 63 yards. He did a lot with his moving around the pocket, changing his launch point, being able to really string plays out, and then moving the pile when he needs to and picking up critical plays. And that can make the difference in college football, right? Connor Wingman did not do a whole lot of that, and he was horrible. I thought he'd be an effective thrower, an effective something coming into the season, which is why I put Texas A&M in the playoffs. But he was 12 for 30, 100 yards on the dot, 3.3 per pass attempt, 2 picks, looked atrocious. He did scramble for 20-something yards, and he just looked awful. Couldn't do anything. The offensive line that we know has injuries and struggles. They lost 2 or 3 linemen throughout this game. They ended up playing with a true center at center, I believe, true freshman at center by the end of this game, and they looked absolutely atrocious. Le'Veon Moss at running back ended up being the guy that took the variety, the most of the snaps there. It looks like the starter because they're trying to sort through running backs there. 3.5 yards per carry. Did get a touchdown. Receiving core, again, not very impressive with what Wingman was throwing out there. Walker, 6 catches for 31 yards, was the leader in receiving yards and catches. Not super great. Not a lot to take from Texas A&M's offense here. It was so bad. It was bad. Defensively, the defensive line had problems with Notre Dame's offensive line, which coming to the game had, I believe it was 6 total starts along the offensive line. So they effectively doubled the total number of starts just by playing in this game, which is incredible. And they really did a great job and just dominated. 0 sacks on the day for Texas A&M's defense. And that's with Notre Dame losing one of its key offensive linemen for the season before this game even kicked off. A big win on the road for Notre Dame. You have to rank them pretty high. The running back, Jeremiah Love, started to get push, over 6 yards per carry, 91 yards, a touchdown towards the end of this game. Offensive line figured it out, pushed around what looked like to be a good defensive line by all accounts, some good players there. And Riley Leonard, even if you're not going to see big passing numbers, can do what he needs to do to win. It looks like they have some guys that can catch the ball as well. Collins, 5 for 62. He's the senior wide receiver there. There we go. Greathouse, Flanagan. They have some guys that can catch the ball, even if ground and pound is really going to be what they're going to do. And the defense, of course, perhaps I underrated that a little bit. Secondary is good. Safeties are good. We got push up front. Notre Dame is now pretty much a lock for the playoffs. Not a lot of surprise there. I kind of left them out because I figured you take a loss, maybe 2. It can be very difficult, right? No conference championship game to help boost your odds there. But, this was a game they had to have. I thought Texas A&M would have taken this one. And now you start to look down. Northern Illinois, at Purdue, Miami of Ohio, Louisville, not sure about that one, and it's at home for Notre Dame. Stanford, Georgia Tech, Navy, Florida State, not so daunting, Virginia, Army, and at USC. Stock up after this week, but it's looking like a much more manageable schedule and look a good football team. Next on my list, I had Penn State in my number 7 slot, and the defense both sides of the ball looked dominating. 34-12 on the road at West Virginia, and West Virginia of this year is probably going to look like what we expected West Virginia of last year, quite frankly, to be. Now, Penn State did score 20 points in the second quarter. That's where a bulk of the action came from. But Drew Aller was 11 for 17 for 216 and 3 touchdowns. Now again, Drew Aller playing great against teams that he should, right? So I'm not sure if this is a particularly, reflecting on this game. Are we going to say, well, this is surprising? Maybe not. Singleton, 13 carries, 114 and a touchdown, almost 9 per carry. Aller got in the mix there, had some nice totes. Allen got in there, was not as successful, 10 for 20 carry-wise. Wallace, the third, Harrison Wallace, the third, 5 catches, 117, 2 touchdowns, looked awesome there. The transfer from Ohio State there did not catch the ball at all, so a little questionable about that. Omari Evans had 2 for 55 as well, so we'll look to see if we get any more nice targets there for Aller. So ended a drive at one point with a 50-yard touchdown pass. I feel like they're still haven't scratched the surface of what they can do, or the ceiling, I should say, but we've got an idea of how dominating they can be. So Penn State definitely stock up. Oregon had some problems initially with Idaho State. Now they've got injuries on the offensive line. They've got all kinds of things going on. So it was a sluggish start to them. I have yet to play the replay back on this game and kind of check it out really and see what was going on. 24-14 though was the final, which was shocking. Expected they could have gone for 70 points, but that was not the case. Dylan Gabriel put the ball in the air almost 50 times. He was 41 for 49 for 380 yards and 2 touchdowns. The problem is, Oregon operates where you throw out a lot of these at the line of scrimmage, behind the line of scrimmage to get plays going. Need to throw it downfield. Throw the damn ball downfield. Right? That's what I scream at my television. Jordan James, 15 carries for 95 yards and a touchdown as they replace their top running back. Also replacing their top receiver, Taz Johnson, 12 for 81 and 2 touchdowns. Terrence Ferguson, 7 for 87 as well. Evan Stewart came over from Texas A&M. He had 3 for 15, so he could still get in the mix there as well. And again, some injuries. They'll get a bunch of guys back and be more efficient. But for now, they didn't look impressive at home against Idaho State, but still mix that in with potential, and they'll be much better moving forward. Gave up 3 sacks in this one. Tackles for losses. Passes batted down. Not a great look initially, so they're further down in my top 10 list. They have to be. Ohio State is also way down here. Potential's great, but they started looking like ass against a terrible, terrible Akron team. We're talking like power ranked probably somewhere in the 120s out of 130. Are we at 130 Division I top level teams here? Something like that. Not a good team. And Ohio State, 17-3 was the halftime score. Like, what are you doing, man? Will Howard was 17 for 28 passing for 228 and 3 touchdowns. He also scrambled for a few yards. Junkins checked in at running back, 13 for 55. That's just over 4 per carry and a touchdown. Henderson, 8 carries for 65 yards. That's over 8 for him. Jeremiah Smith, the freshman, 6 grabs for 92 yards and 2 touchdowns. Looks like the next great wide receiver there for Ohio State, the big 6'3" kid out of Miami Gardens, Florida. Emeka Agabuka, 4 catches for 51 yards as he returns, of course, to be the number 1 guy. And Carnell Tate also had 4 grabs for 58 yards and a receiving touchdown as well. The sophomore there, 6'3", out of Chicago, Illinois. So the receiving core looks to be just fine there. And the defense rolled up 5 sacks and 10 tackles for losses against the Akron Zips. Ultimately, they finished 9 of 14 on 3rd down and double up yardage, 404 to 177, and forced 3 Akron turnovers as well. They were just very slow to get going. They eventually scored 35 points in the second half there. Certainly expect them to continue rolling. Just very tough to get going the first half there. Transfers, right? Transfer running back, freshman receiver. Transfer quarterback. Offensive line pieces are new. Tackles could be a problem again. Probably the weakness, but just figuring stuff out. But man, a sluggish start against Akron. You have to wonder if some of that lingers, of course. So power ranked a little bit lower for me to start off with. And number 10 is Tennessee. Offensive weapons look to be great coming in, but you got a 5-star quarterback in there. How good is he going to be? Is this going to be one of these kids that's right in the Heisman conversation right away? And we're talking about him for the next 2 years as well. And they're playing Chattanooga. Nothing exciting there. 45 points in the first half and a 69-3 blowout, which was you'd expect here. Nico Lama-Leva, 22 for 28, 314. 3 touchdowns, over 11 yards per toss there. Devontae Thornton Jr., 3 catches, 105, 2 touchdowns. That's 35-yard average per toss, but he had a big 59-yarder in there. Brew McCoy's back, 6 grabs for 89 yards, and just almost a dozen guys had catches in this particular game. Couple of backups in there. So we had everyone in the mix. Number of running backs, but Dylan Sampson had 12 carries for 124 yards and 3 touchdowns in this one. Just a great day for Tennessee to get everyone in the mix. Just the competition was much lower. 9 for 15 on third down. Held the opponent to 1 for 14 on third down. Almost tripled up yardage, 718 to 227. Need to clean up a few penalties. Had a turnover in there, but again, just a scrimmage for the most part. So that's my top 10 at the moment. Georgia, Miami, Alabama, Texas, Ole Miss, Notre Dame, Penn State, Oregon, Ohio State, and Tennessee. Now our other notable results. First of all, Florida State quickly bombing its season, losing to Georgia Tech 24-21, and then turning around and losing at home to Boston College 28-13 is probably the most notable point so far of this season. DJ is looking horrible under center. This team is not very good offensively, and the defense is struggling as well. Dual threat quarterback Thomas Castellanos, something close to that, shredded Florida State in their second game. He only threw 16 passes, but had 2 touchdowns in those 2 16 attempts, and ran for 73 yards and a touchdown against Florida State. Caused all kinds of problems and disruptions for them in that second game. DJ was 21 for 42 passing for 272 yards, and they ran for under 30 yards of total offense. They had a couple of fumbles as well, and they just gave up over 200 yards offense in both that game and against Georgia Tech. And their kind of dual threat-ish option there in Haynes King that just threw all kinds of wrenches in what they could do there for the Seminoles. A total of 32 passes thrown against them in these 2 games combined, just very, very difficult. 190 actually credited to Georgia Tech there, but just wild for Florida State to have fallen so far, and DJ to not be very, very effective at all. Lots of problems for Florida State. Not quite sure what they do moving forward, but certainly some wins, I think, on the schedule, but clearly these quarterbacks have been very disruptive, and it's possible they go with a different quarterback themselves moving forward. Just a horrible job by Florida State, coming off the horrible season last year, and now they're unable to run the football, averaging less than 3 yards per carry, unable to throw the football, unable to do much of anything, as they have less than 600 yards of total offense through 2 games. Just atrocious. And 2 losses that look like wins not too long ago. I'm not sure if they're a top 40 team right now, to be quite frank. Just atrocious for Florida State. Other notes, a bunch of teams won, that we'd expect to in the top 25, but NC State struggled a little bit with Western Carolina, getting out in that one 38-21. Grayson McCall had 318 yards and 3 touchdowns in his debut. Jackson Arnold had 4 touchdowns and only 141 yards in 25 pass attempts in his debut for Oklahoma in a big 51-3 win over Temple. Arizona had a big 61-39 win over New Mexico in the Lobos. Look like a surprising team. They're 0-2, but they are feisty, man. Their quarterback there, Dampier, had 130 yards rushing and 2 touchdowns against Arizona alone. But that looks like a sneaky good offense there for a Lobos team who's not expected to win more in a couple games this season. They're in the fight in a couple of them here. Just a interesting team, that Lobos squad. Fifta, 19 for 31, 422 yards, 4 touchdowns, all of them to Tatoria McMillan. 10 catches for 304 and 4 touchdowns, over 30 yards per reception. already the top receiver in the country and should be a dark horse Heisman candidate if he's putting up numbers like that. Conley also had 10 carries for 90 yards and 3 touchdowns in this football game. So watch out for that high-flying Arizona offense. I put that on my top channel flippers team, always flipping over to check out and see what they're doing. Hey, Iowa is playing little offense, 40-0 over Illinois State, but 3 passing touchdowns for Cade McNamara, who did lock down the starting job, 21 for 31 passing for 251, pushing the ball downfield just a little bit, and 2 touchdown passes to a freshman wide receiver. Yes, a wide receiver's catching the football in Iowa country. Can you believe that? Reese Van Zee, 5 for 66 and 2 touchdowns there. Luke Lackley, 6 for 63 yards. He is a tight end. But nevertheless, pushing the ball downfield a little bit for the Iowa Hawkeyes. So expect to see a little bit more going on there. They could be a scary team if they start completing some balls downfield. USC LSU was a great game the other night. 27-20 the final there. Looks like 2 great quarterbacks. LSU, 7th straight opening game loss, but past 2 years in the Brian Kelly era, they both played Florida State and lost both of those. Now a tough game against USC, losing that as well. Glad that they play tough games to open. Tough losses for them, though. Garrett Nussmeier, 29 for 38, 304, 2 touchdowns and a pick. Tough showing there. Looks like they have a nice group of wide receivers as well. Kyron Lacey, 7 for 94 and a touchdown. Aaron Anderson, 5 for 64 and a touchdown. And Mason Taylor, 7 for 62. Miller Moss really put his foot down and accelerated this team. Only 1 touchdown, 27 for 36, 378. Put together the final touchdown drive. Woody Marks looked great, 16 for 68, 2 touchdowns towards the end of that game. Zachariah Branch, 4 catches for 56 yards. Would like to see him return a touchdown, do some stuff, kick returning, but team LSU at least was trying to keep it away from him. Hudson, 5 for 83 yards. We did have this was also kind of a sloppy game, as exciting as it was. We had drops. We had 16 penalties. We only ended up with 1 turnover. 450 yards for USC, 421 for LSU. It looks like both teams are going to be able to make some plays on defense, but might give up some plays over the top still as well. But still, we hit the under here. And it looked like we were on pace to put up a bunch of points, but that was not the case. So both defenses look like they're going to be better. And USC, though, even though it was a touchdown difference, they look like they're much improved on the defensive end, a little bit more than LSU perhaps, and the quarterback looked like a little bit sturdier as well. Skill position guys are there. John Emery, the running back for LSU, looks like he can do some damage as well. Excited to see how both these teams do, quite frankly, moving forward on both sides of the football. Last team I think I want to mention, of course, is the Colorado Buffaloes. We, of course, there have the Deion Sanders crew. They managed to win over the several-time national champion North Dakota State Buffalo Bison. 4 touchdowns, 445 yards for Sanders at the quarterback position. 3 touchdowns for Travis Hunter. He played all but 4 snaps, I believe. It was like 100 and oh boy, I don't have the number in front of me right now. But he played a lot. And we'll have to see if that continues going forward. The thought process, I think, is that you're able to cut down on that a little bit, but that is just not how they're playing him ever. So Jimmy Horn looked good. 7 catches, 198 yards and a touchdown. He's the only other starter that's returned on the offensive side besides Sanders and Hunter. But he looked good. And 7 catches for 132 and 3 touchdowns for Hunter as well. The running game, still not really existent. Maybe the trenches are better on both sides, but not a significant upgrade. They still really struggled there. 31-26 was the final. They were 7-11 on third down. They gave up 7 for 13 on third down. They had 504 to 449 yardage advantage. They had the only turnover of the game, and they still gave up quite a bit on the ground and through the air. I just think, well, they're going to lose games this year, right? They're going to lose quite a few games. I don't think the upgrades were significant enough. No sacks taken by Sanders, but North Dakota State was not necessarily the benchmark for where they're going to be this year as far as quality defenses. So they're going to have to really step it up if they're not going to be another team that takes a huge string of losses towards the end of the season. And they were also doing dumb shit towards the end of this game. They had a chance to basically run the clock out just about, leave North Dakota State with just a few seconds, but they threw the ball on a first down when the clock was already running, had an incomplete pass, left a whole huge chunk of time left on the clock, ultimately punted it back to North Dakota State, who had a chance to win it, just couldn't get the ball down the field. And that's just dumb. So we had dumb coaching decisions. Had a turnover while North Dakota State had a clean game, and just still problems here. Still problems. Shooting yourself in the foot, cannot be doing that. Could have lost this game. Another coin flipper that they kind of come out with. So just worth noting that as well. But that is kind of a overview of week 1. Your only upset really was Florida State, and that's, now they've had 2. So is it really an upset, or do they just suck? I guess I should note, Wisconsin won 28-14 over Western Michigan. Some problems, perhaps there. And then Michigan, very disappointing. Orgy did not start there. We had Warren starting instead. They did not look very good. Offensive line did not look good. Questions at running back, which is weird. Questions at quarterback. Questions on defense. They play Texas this week, though, so further evaluation coming, but they did not look very good. Ultimately in winning against a very good Fresno State team, but still not very good there. Week 2 of the college football season. Your TV guide. I'm going to hit just 3 Friday games here real quick. Big Ten Network at 7 o'clock. We'll have Indiana hosting Western Illinois. The Indiana Hoosiers got started with transfer quarterback Curtis Rourke, who's 15 for 24 for 180 and a touchdown last week against FIU. Doesn't look like a super promising Indiana team, but they do seem to have a few running backs here on the fleet, and were able to run through an inferior team here in Florida Atlantic. Fumbles were a problem for Rourke, put the ball down a couple times, but perhaps a better team than previous years. Not a team that's going to challenge for the upper half of the Big Ten, but a little bit better than the doormat that they have been. So Western Illinois still not a real test, but a little bit better than usual, I guess I'd say, for Indiana. ESPN2 will have SMU and BYU in Dallas, Texas. SMU favored by double digits here. They ran through lower level competition in HCU last week, 59-7. Both quarterbacks, Kevin Jennings and Preston Stone, put touchdowns on the board. They ran for over 300 yards of offense and able to do some real damage there. 10 tackles for loss. Not a whole lot to take away, I don't think, from that game. BYU, on the other hand, 41-13 against SIU, another lower level school. Jake Ratzliff, 20 for 30 at the quarterback position, 348 and 3 touchdowns. Again, not a lot to take away from much lower level competition, but there's a reason SMU is favored, and that's because BYU seemed to struggle a little bit going through this game before ultimately winning by 28. FS1 at 9 o'clock will have Northwestern and Duke. I'm a little surprised to see Northwestern favored by 2.5 on the lake here in their makeshift stadium. Nevertheless, they managed to beat Miami of Ohio 13-6 last week. They were not very impressive. 328 yards of offense. They did have a couple turnovers, just not looking very good. Duke managed to beat Elon 26-3. Malik Murphy, the former Texas Longhorn, transferring over there to be quarterback. He was 26 for 40 for 291, 2 touchdowns, a pick. Great receiver there in Jordan Moore, 7 catches for 112. Eli Pecole had 7 for 81 and a touchdown as well. They did not run the ball very effectively. The defense did manage to get 8 sacks on Elon and shut them down, but the offense seems to struggle a little bit. 5 for 12 on third down, 0 for 2 on fourth, 350 yards of total offense. No penalties, surprisingly. So not going to be a super exciting game, I don't think, but perhaps Duke can pick it up a little bit. Just strange to have Northwestern favored, I think, in this one. Over under 36.5. But those are your Friday games. Everything else is loaded onto Saturday, so I'll be back with that watch guide later in the week, as well as my NFL picks. I will talk to you tomorrow. Bye-bye.
All my blessings, 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 all my blessings.
I need my blessings every penny. Daily counting every single one, I'm seeing plenty. Level up and watch that beat turn into a